I'm going to show you 2 cards, and before I continue, I want you to comment which one has more aura. I have a 7/7 unit and a 7 unit, so which one does it better? Numbers on cards have always fascinated me. Beyond just balance, they have a certain feeling. And I don't know if this is just me, but when I get hit by a 3/1, it feels like I just took a million damage. But when I get hit by like a 3/8, it feels like, that's whatever, you know? This video is about numbers, the way they dictate balance, the way card games do them in different ways, but most of all, the feeling. The feeling you get when you see a certain stat and how it impacts gameplay. So mostly, this is about how card games have started doing numbers differently. I always take the example of Hearthstone in videos like this, where they have a number that is attack and they have a number that is defense. It's very easy. When a 4 attack unit trades into a 7 health unit, the 7 health unit is left with 3 health. It's simple math, but in recent years, games like Marvel Snap, Riftbound, Gwent have all started using only one number to indicate their strength, might, power, whatever you want to call it. And that's the thing, that one number kind of dictates everything. I'm choosing to ignore the mana cost here because that's an entirely different topic and it is mostly tied to balance, but that one number completely changes how card games have played. And I need to tell you, I've been spending a lot of time exploring the world of this game. I wanted to share it with you because the depth is honestly incredible. And if you stick around until the end of this segment, I'll show you exactly how to get an awesome bonus that most players completely miss out on. The big news right now is that the ultimate Death Knight is back. An absolute beast in Raid Shadow Legends. Because of his passive, Too Awesome to Die, which literally redirects damage from your team to him, making him a must-have for the arena. Plus, he heals himself whenever enemies try to heal, which is just beautifully petty and effective. And personally, I've been loving the Undead Hordes faction. The AAA graphics on these character models are insane. And it's cross-platform, so I can grind on my PC or jump on my phone when I'm out. The PvE mode is honestly one of the most advanced I've ever played. And here's the exciting part, you can actually get the ultimate Death Knight for free if you're a new player. Download Raid using my link in the description or the QR code that's on the screen right now. By using my link, you'll instantly unlock a starter pack with the epic champion Drake, who is great for keeping your team alive with Revive on Death. And once you hit level 15, you'll get another epic champion, Knight Errant. But here's the most crucial step. New players can pick one of these 6 legendary promo codes. UDKING is the ultimate Death Knight, which is my personal recommendation. MONKEYKING gives Sun Wukong, DESERTQUEEN gives Tuhan Narak, KITTYCUT gives the Cheshire Cat, GETALICE is Alice the Wanderer, and TREEHUGGER is Green Warden Ruark. Remember, you only get these specific champions if you use my code within 48 hours. Don't go directly to the App Store or you'll miss the bonus. So come find me under the name Snnuy and let's get started. Don't forget to use my link in the description or scan this QR code to get those 2 epic champions and your choice of a legendary to start your journey. And now, on with the video. So this one number means there is no differentiation between offense and defense. That one number is all you get. I'm going to take the easiest example, for me at least, and that is Riftbound. So in Riftbound, if you have a 7 strength unit and you match it up against a 5 strength unit, that means that the 5 strength unit simply dies. It loses combat, and worst of all, the 7 strength unit simply goes back to full health. At some point, if you want to win, you'll have to match it with something that is more than 7 power. But then you look at cards like Marvel Snap. It becomes, how can I win this location I'm at? And do I want to hold back my more powerful card to kind of surprise my opponent and potentially blow them out to win the location anyway? It's not about attrition. It's not about slowly dwindling a card down. It's all about commitment. And because there are less numbers and less math, it kind of feels like there is less depth. But I would argue that the depth of those interactions have simply moved to another place, because you can glance at a board state and you understand what's going on in a second. There are no hidden puzzles, no complicated lethal mathematical equation. You simply look at a state and then you can conclude if a action is safe to take or not. And what this means, and this is the thing I was talking about modern games, it means faster turns, which means faster games, but it also means there are fewer "I lost because I didn't know a certain interaction." I find these one-number systems to be way friendlier to newer players in a card game. There's less, "Oh, I just had no idea that you could do this." Something happened and it's easy to understand why it happened and what will happen in future scenarios that look similar. And that means that designers can put this complexity somewhere else. The obvious example here is simply the text that is on a card. They can have more passive effects, more active effects, active abilities. You look at Marvel Snap and they have ongoing, they have on reveal, they have when I'm destroyed. The list goes on, and I really like this, and it makes archetypes really easy to understand and deck build as well. But here's my favorite thing about this. Marvel Snap started with this where they have locations. You need to conquer a certain part of the board, and this area has a symmetrical effect. And I'm going to take Riftbound, who has also adapted this, as the example. They have effects like when you move here, discard a card and then draw one. So if you're playing a discard deck, this is great for you. But the effect is symmetrical, so that means your opponent also needs to be wary of what's happening, and they can use it to their advantage. So this is where that complexity gets added, and I think it makes a much more rich gameplay experience. It makes games feel more psychological because there is less math and more text, but it also makes them feel much more explosive because there is no attrition. There is no, "I'm going to slowly whittle down this 10 health unit." You need to do it in one go, and that means in Riftbound, you either win the location or you lose it. You get a point or your opponent gets to hold the point. But this does also mean that balancing is a lot more difficult because a +1 on a 7 might unit to become an 8 might unit is a really big buff. But if you look at something like Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra, making a 7/5 and 8/5 usually doesn't really change that much, or it's barely enough to make the card playable. This is why these one-number games to me feel much more chaotic. Everything is decided in an instant, and there's no going back to a certain action that you took, which of course is also why the games are faster, why turns are faster, and because they're so sharp, fast, and tense, it does feel like they kind of give up on a little bit of texture that makes combat really exciting to me. So now we're gonna compare that to the 2-number games, and I feel like this is where the aura that I was talking about earlier really shines through. In 1-number games, you have a card with good stats, average stats, and you have weak stats. Comes with the mana, but that's how you define these cards. Now look at a card with attack and health. Let's take a card in Hearthstone. This card right here is called Sandmaw, and it has absolutely no text, but it is a 3 mana, 7 attack, 2 health minion. This is a card I would classify as a glass cannon. It will get 1 hit in, hopefully, unless it gets removed, and it will kill something, and 99% of the time, this card will die because it only has 2 health. But now, look at this card called Tortolan Traveler. This is a 3 mana, 1/5 with Taunt. Very clearly, we can define this card as a tank. It doesn't do anything in the form of damage, but it will usually tank 2, sometimes 3 hits. That 1 damage it has, it's not really going to remove anything on the board of the opponent, but I love defining cards into archetypes. We have tanks, we have glass cannons, we have value engines. To take an example of Legends of Runeterra, we have a card like Aphelios that is a 3 mana 3/3, and as long as you play 2 cards, he will give you a card in your hand, a 2 mana spell, one of his weapons, and as long as he survives, you can keep doing this turn after turn. So square stats, they are the same. You don't really want to go into combat, but it's very clear that this card needs to have a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense. It needs to be reasonable for the opponent to be able to remove him, but it also needs to be a card that can apply some pressure if it goes unanswered. While the 3-3 is a value engine because of the text on the card, there are also simply cards like Garen in Legends of Runeterra. This is someone that's just really good at trading. It's a 5-mana 5/5. If you put it into combat, it will usually trade 1 for 0 unless your opponent spends 2 cards on it. It wants to keep going into combat and come out slightly ahead of the opponent, so they need to have additional resources to kill that card. And you don't need text to understand the intent of these cards. They have aura because of the way their stats are distributed. And this is where that tactical depth kind of comes forward without really needing to think about it. It's not about conquering a location, it's not about committing more points to a certain part of the game, it's simply about thinking in favorable trades. And that's another thing that these 2-number games do better. They think more in planning ahead. They are multi-turn cards. 6-7 and trade into their 4-4 now. I might be able to still trade into a 2-attack unit later, surviving with 1 health, unless my opponent commits another card to kill my card. And this is something you don't really see in cards like Marvel Snap, because it's simply playing turn by turn and seeing how many points each location has. Riftbound does a little bit better in that sense because there are a lot of combat tricks and there is a lot of play with the mana, the runes, but overall it's very clear that 2-number games do this a lot better. And this is also why these games take much longer, because you can very easily try to accumulate partial victories. And what I mean by that is, instead of completely going all in and getting closer to the total points needed to win, you can win a combat trade. You can have your unit barely survive, so your opponent needs to commit another card. But it's also about sacrificial plays. What if I take damage to my face right now without giving up the unit that I currently have on the board? What if I throw my 1-1 in front of their 4-4 so I take less damage, and then later on maybe I can find a way to deal with that unit that now has 3 health a little bit easier. It's all about that long-term board control, and to me that feels more strategic, but that is also because these games last longer. And if I'm being completely honest, this does also feel like why games like Hearthstone, Magic, Runeterra are able to make a much wider range of archetypes. Because 2 numbers really let designers express their nuance through these stats, through attack and health. If we're looking at a spell-based deck, like Mage in Hearthstone, it's much easier to give the units lower stats with better effects, so you can use spells to kind of express the power of that deck. But similarly, if we're looking at a mid-range deck like Paladin, it's much easier for them to just give rounded stats, be a much more mid-range based deck, because they have 5/5 instead of Mage's 2/3s. So that means you have to compare attacks, you have to track the health of your opponent's units, sometimes 7 at a time. You have to be aware of what buffs they can and can't play, as well as removal. And you have to have the sequencing foresight. You need to know exactly what spell happens when and how you can interact with certain spells that are on the stack. And it is because of this that it is much easier for newer players and less experienced players to misplay. You're looking at so many numbers instead of just 1 number per card. I've played Victor Zoe decks so often, and yeah, I have to admit, it's very easy for mental fatigue to set in. The numbers start inflating, they get bigger and bigger and bigger every turn. The keywords, they multiply, you go from 2 keywords per card to 20 per card, and board states very, very easily become entirely unreasonable. To the point that because of that mental fatigue, you're just like, ah well, I lost anyway, let's just let him hit me and get it over with. So these 2-number games, they really, really reward mastery, but they are kind of lethal for the onboarding experience. So what that all comes down to is that if you're asking me if you want me to simply in a couple of sentences describe 1-number games, they ask of the player, when do you commit? Can you read the intent of your opponent? And do you trust the moment? You prioritize tempo, bluffing, and having a psychological advantage. Whereas 2-number games ask, can you plan? Can you extract value? Are you good at math? And are you good at thinking ahead? So they prioritize efficiency, foresight, and system mastery. So I have a hard time calling one of them superior, Because both are built for different minds. Because both of them are built for different minds and, in a way, different emotional rhythms. And so it is exactly because of that reason that I think most future card games will switch to a one-number system. And this doesn't necessarily that we're taking away complexity, but in a way, because the games are faster, the games are less complex because there are less decisions to make in a game that's short versus a longer game. And I kinda get it, because losing a game in 5 minutes because you made a mistake somewhere 2 or 3 minutes in is much better than playing a control matchup and losing because you made a mistake 25 minutes in. This simply seems to be a development of the recent type of games that have been released, and while I think that sucks, as long as the complexity is still shown in those games, it's not entirely a bad thing. But if you're asking me, I'd rather sit across a table playing a physical card game like Riftbound, which also only has one number, and having a really in-depth experience for about 10 minutes, than I would playing Marvel Snap on the phone and being done in 5 minutes and then getting ready to go on with my day while not even remembering the game I just played. If I had to choose, if I want to play a game long-term, I prefer 2 numbers. If I want to play a game and just completely be distracted and not think back on what I just did, I would absolutely go for the 1-number game, and it's why I still play Marvel Snap after so many years. And this discussion isn't perfect by any means, because Riftbound is so similar to Runeterra, which is a 2-number game, and Riftbound is a 1-number game, so it falls somewhere in the middle. There is still complexity, there is still a lot of text on cards, there is the locations that add the depth, but I still feel like the planning ahead and the value trading and the playing for the board is very slowly becoming a thing of the past, which for the OG card gamers is a real shame.